Please welcome our next panel, What Happens When We Can't Tell What's Real? With Joan Donovan, Research Director of the Shorenstein Center for Media, Politics, and Public Policy, Meg Kelly, Senior Visual Forensics Reporter for The Washington Post, and moderated by Ellen Cushing, Projects Editor at The Atlantic.
Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you all. Can we just start from first principles? And we have some slides later, but can you just tell me what a deepfake is? Joan, you can start.
But Meg is so much more on the front lines. It's when we talk about audio, video manipulation, it used to be we'd talk about, Photoshop, right? If something's Photoshopped, we assume that it's been edited or refreshed or brightened in some way. Of course, on your phones, if you Insta, there's all these filters. But when we're talking about deepfakes, we're talking about beyond these types of technologies that allow you to do this kind of manipulation either on your phone. Deepfakes really are AI manipulated video. And what that means essentially is that any one of us that has about 30 images online could be turned into a video that could be using your face to say something you didn't mean, using your face to say happy birthday to grandma, even though you didn't do it.
Grandma.
Even though you didn't do it. But the way in which deepfakes have arrived in some ways begins with a bit of techno panic, where people are very afraid that videos that look real, they look realistic. If you use audio fakes as well, there's a very famous clip of Joe Rogan where there's so much audio of Joe Rogan that you can essentially make him say anything you want to. And sometimes it's funny and cute and it can be satire, but the problem when we talk about the problem of deepfakes is really about, well, how would they affect any one of us, any individual? And we know that through some surveying online a few years ago, 95% of deepfakes are to make pornographic videos. And so if you've got an ex that you really miss, you can pay a company to put them in compromising positions, and maybe that's for your personal use. And now I'm gonna get trolled online. But that is not a great thing, but it's also not illegal, right? And so we see deepfakes being used to harass people. We see deepfakes being used to steal the identities of usually female celebrities and put them into sexually abusive situations. And so when we talk about deepfakes, we can't just say, oh, it's just a technology, it's neutral, because we also have to look at the context in which it's being used. And here's a little deepfake history too, and I'll wrap up here, and you're gonna have to keep telling me to wrap it up.
Okay.
It comes from a Reddit username. And this guy was a hobbyist, and he would make videos of celebrities in different vignettes. And so that's where we get the name deepfake. It just comes from this Reddit user who was a hobbyist using that technology. But as we see it scale, as we see more and more apps and software that allows more and more people to do that, we have to start worrying about, well, will deepfakes be used to cause panic? Will they used to cause chaos? Will they be used to blackmail or harass women or other vulnerable or marginalized groups? And the answer is yes, which is why we do see some legislation and policy coming into the frame about identity theft. But unfortunately, we can't uninvent it, right? You can't go back now, so we have to figure out how to reckon with it.
Meg, can you talk a little bit about the work you do and how you think about and define deepfakes?
Sure. So our team works sort of broadly speaking, verifying video and investigating various incidents, trying to sort of put together, the most complete version of a picture of an event. So, taking some clip you see on social media and making sure that what it's claiming to be is actually what it is. Mm-hmm. We also produce something that I think is called the Fact Checker's Guide to Manipulated Video that came out a few years ago. And it sort of talks through all the different ways that video is manipulated and includes deepfakes and sort of malicious transformation as one of those categories. Mm-hmm. And it very much focuses on sort of the other 5% of deepfakes, which tend to be in the political arena. And for the most part, the way I think about them is at this moment, they're a small portion of the ways that video is manipulated and circulated online. And so while if we had like sort of a white whale of a deepfake that is like really well done and really difficult to say, yeah, that really could be real, like it's really persuasive, I think there are amazing researchers who are able to sort of take that apart and say, actually, no, this isn't real. But chances are it probably would have spread quite far before we were able to do that.
Right.
But we haven't seen that yet. The things that we're seeing that get sort of more attention tend to be the slowed down video of Nancy Pelosi, for example, mm-hmm. which goes viral before anyone like me has a chance to say, actually, they just pulled the video a little bit to the left and slowed her down, and she didn't sound like that or look like that at all.
And what were they trying to do with that video for those who haven't seen it?
Right, so they were trying to say she was drunk and that she was sort of out of control and that she was slurring her words. Well, all of that happens when you slow any video down.
Sure.
So, it was a persuasive clip. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't accurate.
I know we have 3 slides, don't worry everyone. Can we start showing them? Oh, they're, you guys.
Over there. Oh,
yes.
this is the one from your
Yes. So this
guide.
is our sort of categories of how we think about manipulated video at the Post and sort of the different ways in which video can be manipulated. So you sort of see the malicious transformation, which is the very far end is the deepfake, but that goes all the way to sort of misrepresentation, where someone's showing a clip of something that is totally accurate and maybe just the caption that they've put on it is misleading.
Right, or you see this with the date has been changed.
Totally.
You see this a lot on social media.
Yeah, and I think a good example of something we often see in conflict is someone will take a video from Ukraine in 2014 and post it saying it was Gaza last summer. And you have to look at the geography and the weapons and all of that stuff to be able to prove that, in fact, no, it isn't what they're claiming it is in terms of the caption that we're seeing on Twitter.
Can we go to the next slide? This is Stalin.
Anybody know what this is? You guys heard of Russia? It's been in the news lately. So this is a photograph. There's a great book by David King called The Commissar Vanishes about the way in which Stalin, during the episode of the Great Purge, disappeared people from photographs, right? And so on the one side you have Stalin's very loyal henchmen, and then as that person was executed and disappeared, he was also erased from the historical canon, right? And this is a very good image of photo manipulation that was done as a way to shape a historical record, right? And this is what we're going through right now. The standards of evidence are changing. Sometimes we'd say, oh, well, it's a photo, it must have happened, and there's a whole history. If you Walter Benjamin and the art and the mechanical age of reproduction, if you're, inclined to read things like that, the way in which photo arrives historically in our world upends us, it destabilizes us, it makes us question what is real. I wrote a paper with Britt Paris about deepfakes and cheapfakes, and we looked at X-rays. So X-rays, which we're all familiar with, everybody's probably broken a bone or needed an X-ray at some point. But the worry about X-rays, especially in courts, was that anytime an X-ray was introduced into the court, you need to have an expert doctor come testify. It's a new technology. Not every doctor has access to X-rays. And so you see our institutions start to come up with other functions of gatekeeping, other ways of validating X-ray images. And it was fairly important that we got that standard of evidence right, because people were either suing their workplace, saying, you know, I have these injuries, they occurred at work, and you'd go in and the X-ray would show a broken bone, and then the defense would be able to say, well, that's just an artifact of the development process. That's not really a broken bone, that's just part of what it looks like. And so you would need to have these doctors that came in and in a jury setting have a bit of a combative back and forth about the standards by which X-rays should be read. And we settled it. We're okay now. You can sue your employer for all kinds of things, including broken bones, repetitive strain injury, what have you. But in situations like this, where evidence is manipulated by very powerful people, it becomes even harder to reset that context. It becomes even harder to even inject expertise, because the will of a ruler is different from the will of the people. And so I always go back to this example, because imagine the flood of stuff we're trying to make sense of right now, and manipulated video, manipulated audio, images of events that never happened. And 100 years from now, someone's going to be sitting down with a corpus of Facebook data. Maybe not. I mean, they're pretty tight with their data, let's be honest. This is a joke for the researchers in the audience. My people, where are you? You know, but someone's going to sit down with a corpus of this stuff and have to try to refigure out what was real, what really happened. And the better the tools of manipulation get, if they can outpace expertise, they can outpace the institutions of journalism that we've put in place to vet these things, and they remain online and they remain part of the digital record, we're going to have a very distorted historical future.
We have one more slide. This
is the audio one.
I can't see it. Oh, is this the?
we're having a little.
Oh, okay. So this
Can you
is
see it?
actually, yeah, I think I can see it now.
Yeah.
This is a Telegram post that was put out just before Russia invaded Ukraine, and it claims to show a Ukrainian military vehicle crossing over into Russia in an attempt to start an incursion, essentially. And what we thought that seemed pretty unlikely. And so what we did was we actually used a variety of tools from sort of geolocation to be able to prove that this video, which was being circulated and people were sharing it, wasn't showing what it was claiming to show. So we were able to geolocate it, actually show that it was pretty far into Russian-held territory. So it would be unlikely that a Ukrainian military vehicle all by itself would have gotten that far into Russian-held territory. And then, you know, there was another video that came out of the same incident, and we were able to say, oh, actually, that's a Russian military vehicle. That is actually, we know that this type of armored vehicle is something that the Russian armed forces have and something that the Ukrainians don't. And that was, and from those two pieces of information, we were able to say, okay, this is a false flag. They're putting this out there to give justification for action that's coming. And sure enough, I think it was 24 or 48 hours later, the invasion began. But I think that this is a useful example to sort of show us how these things pop up and how they can look legitimate, and how a little bit of digging, whether it's by you at home, sort of poking around on the internet, doing some reverse Google searches, or from someone like our team, can be helpful to make sure that we're not sort of falling for some of these false flags.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And can we talk a little bit more about Ukraine? This is a conference devoted to democracy. I mean, I guess my question is, Joan, you mentioned techno-panic before. Like, how worried should everyone in this room be about both, you know, the extreme far end 5%, but also all kinds of manipulated video as it relates to the way we interpret world events and understand this war that's halfway around the world? I guess this is a question for both of you. Meg, you can start.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a tough question. I think that the proliferation of online video in some ways gives us a more complete picture into what's happening. You know, there are places, for example, in Mariupol where the Post hasn't been able to send reporters, but because of satellite imagery and people sharing videos, we're able to sort of put together a picture of what's happening. And I think that's a very useful thing. But those are also verified videos that we have gone through and made sure are from the places that they say that they are and from the time that they are claiming to be. In terms of how worried to be about it, I think it's a challenge. I think it's, you know, the sort of non-deep fake level of manipulated video, I think is something we're just seeing constantly in all different formats all the time, which is why it's important to check these things. I wish I had a better answer about that.
No, that's a great answer,
You know.
Joan.
This is like near and dear to my research team. Jane Letmanenko's, formerly of BuzzFeed, thanks Ben Smith. You know, she's an incredible reporter. She's also Ukrainian and has a very specific and particular point of view on what's going on. And it's vital to have someone like that who knows the context, knows the history, be there to help you understand and explain what it is that we're seeing, because even the short videos are confusing. You've got thirst traps, Chechen fighter thirst traps on TikTok, you know, both looking for a date and looking for combat, and, you know, sometimes they're not finding it. So there's a lot to go through, and I've got, you know, a few bones to pick with social media platforms and probably a few to break, because unfortunately, I just heard it this morning when I was watching CNN. Don't hate me for it. I just watch news. The Clinton News Network, right? Come on, guys. It's early. Come on, a little Roger Stone humor. Anyway, I was watching it this morning, and you know, there were people on, generals, et cetera, affiliated with Harvard, you know, saying, you know, Ukraine can really win this. You know, Ukraine's in a position to win this. You know, a few more, you know, S-300s, and they got this, you know. And then you look at the photos from Bucha, and you're just like, the Bucha photos were a burning cross. That was Russia leaving a message for the rest of Ukraine to say, stand up, resist, and we will kill you like dogs in the street, right? And my perspective here is that where the companies come up and where it's important that we actually get a true historical record of what's coming out of these regions, most people don't know that algorithms, and I'll say the word naturally here with a couple of these air quotes, suppress death and gore, right? And so the things that people are trying to get out on the ground of this brutality.
Right, and sorry, just to interrupt to clarify, they suppress death and gore because most of the time we don't want to see them.
Yeah, and they, you know, there's a reason why you don't see as much nudity on social media. I mean, some of you had AOL profiles in the 90s, no spam and nudity, serious problems.
Snuff films. Yeah.
Right, yeah, like all kinds of stuff. That stuff is still flowing through the veins of social media, but they have gotten really good at making algorithms that remove that stuff from circulation. But when it comes to war, when it comes to real-time atrocity, it is important that our senses are activated, our sense of outrage, our sense of justice, our sense of duty, our sense of humanity. And if we feel as if Ukraine's got this, I wonder, am I, you know, towing the NATO party line, right? As a researcher, I have to wonder whose narrative is that, right? Because it's not coming from Ukrainians. And so as we think about reality in this moment, even when you want to be informed, I want to know, I want to see, I need to see so that I know. I can't look away. I must bear witness. I can't, right? Because of the way these systems are designed. And because of the way that this moment dovetails with the paradox of social media, which is essentially that, on the one hand, it does an incredible service of allowing people to get information out of an area and into the inboxes of the Washington Post and into the frame of international media. But at the same time, it does that for dictators and authoritarians. And then deeper in the tech stack, it also erases the most marginalized, the most vulnerable. And that's why we have to care deeply about what these rules of content moderation come to be, what these systems that get put in place come to be. Because if we don't care now, like I was saying earlier, we're not going to have a complete historical record that is reflective of the time. We're going to have this, as Lam Toy Vogue talks about, this funhouse mirror effect, that the digital media that we're seeing is actually very distorted from the picture of reality that we should be recording and using to hold people to account. And the last thing I'll say is just about the word evidence itself, which is when we call something evidence, it's because, one, it's got some kind of valence of truth. It's passed through some institution in which we will say this institution has vetted it and makes it evidence of a thing. But it's about truth. And as Maria Ressa says, you know, there's no truth without trust, and there's no trust without truth. And so we have to care about the truth if we are going to create a society in which people can trust one another. And that, to me, is the most important part here, especially about what's going on in Ukraine. Timothy Snyder says, Anna Applebaum points out, Ukraine is the underdog here, and we cannot forget that. We cannot imagine a world in which Ukraine powers through this, given the amount of death and destruction we are bearing witness to if we choose to.
So going back to something Maria Ressa said yesterday, and this is a theme of this whole conference, like lies and disinformation travel farther and faster than facts. I was wondering, you know, both of you have devoted your professional lives to finding and, you know, rooting out disinformation and misinformation. I guess this is more a question for Meg. Can you just talk to me about how long it takes to do the work you do verifying a video for the Washington Post?
Yeah, I mean, it always depends on the video,
Sure.
so I just want to caveat that. There's no hard and fast rule. But I think that Joan makes a great point, which is that having expertise in a region or in sort of the background about it, you know, my background is not, I'm not a Russia expert, so I've learned a great deal about Russian military vehicles in the last couple of months. And so, you know, but the people that I do work with who have spent a lot of time in the region and have, you know, the language skills and the type of sort of real expertise, it's incredibly helpful. They're able to verify things much more quickly because they know to say, oh, they don't have that in the eastern part of the country, they would only have that in the western part of the country. They can read a sign, they can read a road sign in a way that I can't necessarily. On average, it probably takes us a couple of hours to verify a video. And in that time, as we all know, that video will have gone all kinds of places and probably had already been all kinds of places by the time that I'm seeing it. So.
We'll go to questions in a second, but my last question for you is, like, you know, Joan, you mentioned birthday videos. Is there any upside to this technology, and what do we do? You know, most technology has an upside and a downside, and sort of like, how do you think about balancing those out? Is the upside of being able to send grandma a birthday video, is there any world where we can justify that given the harm that deepfakes and other manipulated video and audio cause?
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be awesome if you just like flipped on a video on Netflix or Hulu or your preferred, you know, platform, and it was dubbed in such a way so that you could watch without being distracted by, you know, lips that aren't, you know, in sync with the audio? That would be awesome. I think, and you know, you could make deepfakes do that. You could make deepfakes that allow for this kind of massive translation of audio and video into other languages, as well the way in which AI is used to create not just audio and video, but as Camille Francois studied, read fakes, like they can create articles. You know, there are things that could benefit, but the trade-off with that isn't just harassment or lots of fake stuff moving around. There's actually really a labor question embedded in deepfakes. You make your lifestyle as an actor. You know, if someone's going to translate your movie into Italian, you know, what is the cost to you of that, right? And so we have to think about, well, what are the labor issues embedded in automating these kinds of technologies and new presentations of the self? And so I wonder about that. So it's not just that deepfakes can be sneaky. I was dying to show you guys Elon Musk as a baby deepfake, and I was told the technology here is too complicated. So if you go
Everyone can Google it.
Yeah, if you go to my Twitter, I'm Boston Joan, I just put it up there. And it's funny. It's Elon Musk is a baby, and I'm just a baby, right? And goo goo gaga. But they're funny videos, right? And so I am, you know, very pro entertainment. And so
Joan Donovan comes out as pro entertainment.
I come out, finally have one thing positive to say about technology. But by and large, there's a lot of experiments. There's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of possibility here. And we would never want to forestall that. Donald Mackenzie, the scholar of science and technology studies, wrote a whole book about inventing accuracy. And it's all about how you invent the atom bomb, and then all of these scientists really don't have a lot to do because the bomb is just completely destructive. So to keep the bureaucracy going, they just keep trying to make the bomb more accurate, right? And they're like, you know, we gotta really land this nuclear bomb exactly where we think it's gonna go, even though it decimates for hundreds of miles, right? And then he has to ask himself the question, can we uninvent the bomb, right? And we can't. We can't uninvent nuclear technology. And with technology like deepfakes, we can't uninvent them. And we can promote pro-social uses of them. We can promote awareness and literacy of them. I'm excited for the conspiracy panel with Jacqueline and Abby later, because I think as we think about the standards of evidence and how communities make sense of the world around them, images, video, these things are incredibly important. And they could also be really important for making counter speech. But we haven't really explored those possibilities yet, and we haven't really explored how communities could be empowered by these technologies in different ways. And so I don't want to foreclose or forestall any possibility of technological innovation, but I will tell you, the baddies, you know, have good use of this technology. They know what they're doing, and they're using it against, you know, the faculties of the skull. Like, they're using it against us in these different ways. And I'll just give you one other example that's not Elon Musk as a baby. There was a deep fake of a kind of anemic-looking Zelensky that was going around that was basically saying, we're going to give up, you know, like Ukraine isn't going to keep pursuing this war. And luckily, it was really bad deep fake. It was just you know, it just didn't really hit, you know, like it should. But that doesn't mean that that's not going to happen in the future, you know, and part of it is about raising the morale and raising the specter of disagreements on one side or on the other. And so I'm unsure what the future of these technologies are going to be, but I do think we need to have more experimentation in pro-social ways.
Mm-hmm. Meg, what do you think?
I think I would just thinking of sort of the last example that Joan was talking about, it reminds me of an example from a few years ago where there was a video of a president who had had a stroke. And a lot of people came out and said, this is a deep fake. He's not saying this. Mm-hmm. And you know, there's no way, because there had been these reports that he'd been in the hospital and no one had seen him for a period of time. And we actually sort of looked into it, and it turned out to be an actual video. But because the fact that he'd had a stroke, the way his face moved had changed. And so consequently, it was much harder to prove that it was real. In the meantime, though, you sort of created this like specter of disinformation, right? People were able to capitalize on the lack of clarity around what was real and what wasn't real. And I think the other thing I'd like to add to what Joan was saying about sort of the historical record and the way that the social media companies have changed it. There are efforts by groups, the Yemeni archive and the Syrian archive come to mind, that have put a lot of time into trying to figure out how to take, bits of evidence that are appearing on social platforms and archiving them in a way that can be used in court and can be used in the International Criminal Court and for sort of human rights purposes and putting together that full picture. But those are bespoke, sort of academic, time-intensive efforts, and they're not something that is applied to the entire, algorithm, as it were. So.
Thank you. We have time for a couple questions. Someone will come to you shortly.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Olivia Gross. I'm a current second year in the college. This is more for Meg, but I'm really curious as to what the action step is after you and your team are aware a video is fake and what challenges you face. Kind of knowing something is fake and it's still being out there. How can you combat the disinformation that's still out there with the awareness you and your team now have?
That's a great question. Combating is a little bit above our pay grade. But for the most part, the Post, like many other news organizations, our fact checker team does have a partnership with Google. Facebook has made a number of efforts towards sort of labeling misinformation and disinformation and promoting fact checks connected to those. One thing that our online sort of guide to false video did was gave that taxonomy to Google. So when we would write something that says, hey, this video is being promoted as X, Y, or Z, they would be able to surface that whenever someone Googled that video. It doesn't go a hugely long way to suppressing it, but I think that what we do is sort of our effort at saying, we're putting out something that if you're actively searching to find out if this is real, you're also going to come across what we've reported.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Michael Kamick. I work at the Behavioral Insights team. As you both know, there are a bunch of fantastic researchers who've tried to look at the impact of fake headlines or fake anecdotes on people's behavioral intent and beliefs and attitudes. Do we know yet how the kind of effect of what you call malicious transformation or deepfakes, how the effect of those types of content compares? How far along is that literature in understanding their impacts?
It's a really good question, and in terms of the behavioral studies, I'm not really aware of any that do that, particularly trying to understand if someone sees a deepfake, do they have some kind of switch in their behaviors or their beliefs. The research that is probably most most ahead of the game is technical literature on how to detect deepfakes, and then some of the legal moral literature on the responsibility of platforms and distributors or makers of technology that produce realistic video to watermark their products. I'm at the Kennedy School. There's a lot of policy research. There's very few things that can happen to persuade someone to move political party any which way. And so we're talking about a very minute piece of the puzzle when we're talking about voting. But at the risk of creating hysteria here, the culture wars are where you're going to see this stuff play out, and where you're going to see allegations about, this person did this person is, some kind of, it'll come up many times, probably in the conspiracy panel, of calling people pedophiles, right, is a very charged way to, one, re-traumatize people who were abused as children, those people feel very invisible. And then what you end up seeing is those people coming out and saying, I'm not going to ignore this problem, right? And so I think when we start to see deepfakes arrive, if ever, we are going to see them in that individualized way, and it's going to be charged on some kind of culture war issue, if they do end up having any significance in terms of changing somebody's behavior, or attitude, or lifestyle.
I think we have time for one more, probably.
Oh,
Yeah.
this is for Joan and Meg. Joan emphasized how much people look at videos and stuff for entertainment rather than for truth. And maybe we shouldn't try to suppress that. And in a way, the deep fakes issues have gotten people overexcited that it's almost impossible to tell a fake from a real. But I think what could be done is, and this ties in more with what Meg talked about, is it's better to get the video authenticated at the source. And I think the mathematical techniques such as time stamping and even things like time bracketed authentication, these are ways that are little known. Probably, how many people here know what a hash function is? Raise your hands. Okay, so this is something that if the public was more informed about this, you could have a 3 or 4 level scale of reliability for videos. The 0 scale meaning it's just for entertainment. And then 1, it matches the local metadata and things like that could almost be automatically checked. And then 2 is it really has evidence that it was produced at this time that is mathematically and sort of legally sound. And then maybe 3 is some fact checker has actually looked at it. And if people got used to using that standard and understanding how some of these mathematical techniques worked, and then they would be able to separate their entertainment from their politics.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a big fan of believing that politics is entertainment, but it's a good question, and it reminds me, years ago I was at this awesome science studies conference in Italy, and I say that just because I wish I was in Italy. Chicago's nice. It's nice. But it was the founder of the MP3 was giving a keynote talk, and he talked all about how it's great to be the founder of the MP3. And all of us have MP3s in our phones, but to get MP3 to be the standard by which we circulate audio online means a bunch of other standards had to fail, and it took a couple of decades to make it happen. And so I love standards. I'm a geek. Like, let's standardize everything. Like, let's order the world like a library. That was one of Google's missions at one point. But unfortunately, standardization of video and of evidence might be out the window when it comes to the speed, scale, and distribution of this. Malicious actors, and everybody in here that is a disinfo researcher knows this, is they're trying to trick you. And so that part of the puzzle where you're like, well, we'll just verify the metadata. They're going to figure out a way to insert the metadata. They're going to figure out a way to use those standards and use those functions as part of their way of making something believable or making something seem more true. And so we have to be wary about that. And then we also have to think, well, if we're going to invent a new standard, how are we going to do it? How are we going to get the platforms to abide by it? And frankly, is that the question, right? Is that the right way to go about this? You know, a lot of people say, we should just make everybody online have to fingerprint, their posts, and then we'll know it came from Ellen. And it's just like, no, that's just not going to happen.
Because the bad guys are always going to be one step ahead of us.
Exactly. And so it's hard, because that's why we need institutions like journalism and academia and technology. We need all of these people to step up and bring together a whole of society effort to rescue truth in this moment. And that includes rebuilding institutions in a way that makes this stuff less potent. But I agree with you. I would try the standard route at some point. But right now, I just don't see the technical feasibility of it.
Meg, do you think there's any hope for standardization here?
I think that you see some efforts at it, but I think that that's sort of really a question for, all of the folks in this room who are policy people and who are, work in government or want to work in government or work with the companies, right? Like, I think that we can go so far as journalists to label things and to sort of make things clear and transparent in terms of what we're doing and what we're finding. And similarly, I know that a lot of researchers do that. But I think the question of standards is sort of in other people's powers.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.